Hello and welcome to the SciComm Spectrum podcast. This week's guest is Tom Sanders, founder and animation director of Tinmouse Studios. For almost 10 years, Tinmouse Studios have been making content that truly matters through education and purpose-led projects. Their impressive client list includes the Science Museum in London, the UK Parliament Education, TED Ed, and Imperial College London. In this conversation, we dive into what really goes into building a purpose-driven business. It's super clear that Tom is very passionate about what he does and the impact he leaves on the world. We talk about why simplicity is king and it beats jargon every single time, and how AI is reshaping animation and education. If you've ever wondered how creative skills can open doors in science communication, which usually feel like two completely opposing worlds, this is the episode for you. Tom, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. I'm really excited to talk.
Hello, Julia. Yeah, it's nice to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Where are you tuning in from today?
So we are in, well, we're multiple places. We're a remote studio. So I personally am in Chelmsford in Essex, which is about half an hour by train from London. And then my counterpart, Mike, is in all the way in Blackpool, so in the north of England, on the coast. So we've been running that kind of setup for like 10 years now.
So you were running a remote company before it was cool to run a remote company?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And now we kind of didn't used to tell our clients that we were remote, and then COVID hit and everyone went remote, and we could kind of be a bit more free and say, oh yeah, we were doing this before. And it kind of like hammering the point home that, you know, we were revolutionary before it was cool.
And how many are you in the team? Is it just the two of you?
It's the two of us. So we're kind of like the animation directors for different projects. We design most stuff in-house and then kind of get freelancers in to help us out with the animation. Sometimes there's a specific style that we need, so we go out to reach out to people. But yeah, most of it kind of comes from our brains. Whether it's a good thing or not, I don't know. But yeah, it seems to be working.
Nice. I think it might be useful if you don't mind just rattling off a few of the different types of roles that you would go to a freelancer for. Who have you needed in the past? What kind of spectrum of people?
Yeah, so for us, like our kind of process, we're kind of end to end. So the studio produces everything. So we go right from the research all the way to delivery and cut downs for social media and stuff. So, I mean, right at the beginning of that process, I do a lot of script writing, but that comes through experience, not so much something that I started doing. So we do pull in script writers for certain things that are very specific or niche. And then we pull in other people like storyboard artists, or illustrators are really good if you need like a specific style. Or for us, it's just like looking at something on LinkedIn, or, oh, we really want to use them. They explain that topic really well. We want to use that. And we try and bring them in where we can. Obviously, it all boils down to budget at the end of the day. And it's the same thing with animation. So if we see a style we like that we can't quite deliver on, because we've all got our set skills, and yeah, we bring people in for that sort of thing. And then voiceover artists, yeah, we don't do that ourselves. We do some medical jobs, and that we need like a specific kind of medical practiced voiceover artist, because they can kind of pronounce the words that other people can't. So that's quite interesting when you hit across topics like that, especially when we're doing like the rough voiceovers for the animation and stumbling over words. You realize how difficult it is to try and make that kind of stuff flow really nicely and sound natural.
That's something that I never would have thought of. I've never thought about them specializing in different kinds of content, which is silly because I'm a scriptwriter and I specialize in a kind of script. So why wouldn't a voiceover artist also specialize? Yeah,
we've definitely worked with some in the past. So I imagine it is a niche somewhere. I think it's just that natural ability to they usually have a background, like script writers. When we work with them in the medical kind of arena, they've got a background. They're either a doctor, or they've done stuff in the past, like within the industry that they're obviously specializing in. So, and it's just that natural way of feeding in that sort of information. Whereas where I've kind of written scripts that use, let's say, jargon, for want of a better phrase, that's very specific, it's harder for me to weave those words in without it sounding unnatural, because I'm trying to obviously fit things in where I know where they fit. So yeah, working with script writers and voiceover artists to specialize, it just sounds a lot better, a lot clearer.
And what kind of videos do you normally do? Are you exclusively creating science animations? If so, is there a specific area of science, or do you go into other industries also?
So we do a lot. So when we started, it was kind of just like, we're taking anything on. You want the business to start somewhere. So you're just saying yes to lots of things. So We've kind of worked across a broad spectrum of things from like, social media advertising for Krispy Kreme donuts, for example, all the way down to medical stuff, medical procedures. So there's two ends to what we do. And I think over the 10 years, we've kind of just realized where our clients are coming from, who's coming back to us, and where we kind of want to niche out to. And I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we've really honed in and thought like education, as broad as it is, we seem to be doing a lot more of that, like actually educating our audiences on different topics rather than selling an object or selling a service. It tends to be more explainer kind of type of videos.
Was that sort of prompted by demand that you saw, that there was just lots of demand for that kind of work? Or was it a conscious decision of this is the kind of stuff that excites us as the people running the studio and this is what we want to do?
I think it's a bit of both, really. In terms of when we got those projects in, they were probably the ones we spent a bit more time on and you give a bit more love to, and they tend to be the projects that maybe have a longer timeline. So therefore, I guess the final product's that bit better or sharper, and you're putting it out on social media, and they're the kind of projects you talk about with a bit more love. People come back, and I think it's just one of the, it's not, you don't consciously do it. I don't think we ever consciously did things, say, beyond the 6-year mark, up to 6 years. We weren't consciously really going out to certain industries. It was only after like a proper deep dive into what we were doing, we kind of realized, okay, actually, a lot of this work is this, and this is actually the work we like doing. So something's happened along the way. Again, those happy accidents. It's not really like a clear pathway, but.
Isn't that great when what you enjoy and what is in demand and what pays all lines up? That's just the golden ticket.
It really is. Yeah. I think that you kind of discover what you're passionate about, in a really offhand way. You settle into that rhythm. And now I think over the last 4 years, we've actively kind of gone out and looked for those sorts of things, like looked for the tenders that are that sort of focus, or we've reached out to our clients again and pushed that side of the business. I think, that's the way we're heading now. And that's really interesting to us. So I'm kind of glad it's happened this way.
Yeah. And speaking of passion, what drew you initially to animation? Because I know you and animation go way back.
Yeah. That's a big question. So how long have I been in the industry? Let's say 15 years. I always doodled as a kid. I think that was probably the bottom line. I don't know if your viewers might be aware of like the Beano comic. That for me was like, being here in the UK, I used to get that every week, and that was a big thing. I'd always copy the drawings. I mean, like right from the word go, I liked doing something creative. And I think going to university, I wanted to do illustration, and then I saw an animation degree. I thought, that'd be fun. So it was literally just that, that'll be fun. No background. It just kind of born out of that. I think I just liked bringing things to life. And I was an animation freelancer and then a director for about 5 years in and out of London. And I just got to the stage where I didn't want to go in and out of London all the time. So I thought I'd just set up on my own, become a remote studio, and just, I kind of played off being a freelancer in the studio for about a year, and the studio kind of took over, if you like. And yes, it's done well. I like doing what I want to do, but obviously I've got to run the business as well. So you got the business side now. So that kind of takes half my time, and the creative kind of slips. But
I think that's a very good point that we can get into a little bit if you want. Of, you've been doing this for almost a decade now, running your own animation studio, and I imagine that you've seen 1,000,001 changes in those 10 years. If you think what you were doing early doors to what you do now, or how you do it, is there anything that you look back and you go, gosh, I can't believe we used to do that like that? Like, what were we thinking?
I don't think, to be honest, like you said, I don't think there's been a massive, I think the shift's happening now, I think I've had it easy for 10 years. Being brutally honest, I don't think the software's changed that much in terms of how we create stuff. When in terms of like how I marketed myself 15 years ago, I was going door to door, handing around CD-ROMs with my, my show reel on, or DVDs or something. That's changed, definitely. But I mean, in terms of how we actually do our job, I don't think anything's changed. I think the shift's happening now with AI and where that's going to lead. There's nothing that can kind of do what we do at the moment in AI, but it's coming. I'm not naive to the fact that if you ask me this in 10 years' time, I think I'd be sitting there going, yeah, that was massive. That was a big shift. I think the shift is now. I think now's the time to start thinking, what do we invest in? How do we create content? And I think doing stuff within education, it's a slippery slope in terms of how much you use AI, how you use it, and things like that. Like, it's so easy to like ask AI to write a script for you, and it could churn something out. And if you're not careful, you can just sit there and you could just make a video really easily and go, yeah, that'll do, without putting any kind of effort into the research and things like that. So I think that's going to become an issue within this space, how much false information or not checked information. Because AI is good, but it could be good for 80%, but the 20% that's wrong or differing is probably quite a big deal when someone like yourself can write a script and it could be 100% correct, so because it's being checked by lots of people, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I really, this hits home for me because obviously I use AI in my process, but it's not, I've experimented with it a lot to try to cut down how long things take me as much as possible. But I have never found something that gives me an output that I'm happy with, where I could be like, okay, this is actually a good starting point, and I can just sort of tweak it from here, or, polish up the tone of voice, and then it's like good to go. I have timed myself working because I'm obsessed with numbers. And at this moment, it's faster for me to just sit down and do it old school. Let's put it that way. It's actually faster for me to go and read things myself, make notes myself, flesh out an outline, do a first draft, edit it, fact check it, all myself is faster than trying to get AI to make it do the same thing, because the quality of output is just so much lower. For now, again, in like a year, maybe this is completely different. But right now, September 2025, it's just not there yet. And there are specific tools for scripting that are coming out now too, specifically for YouTube scripting. And I've tried some of them, and yeah, it's just very vague and repetitive, and it might work for certain niches, but if you're writing anything documentary style or anything that's heavily, scientific or requires fact checking, it's not there yet.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that word you said, they're vague. I think that's it delivers you information and you think, oh, wow, this is great. But then you really dive into that and you think, oh, no, but that kind of paragraph is nothing. There's nothing.
It doesn't say anything. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for us, like, I've never used it in terms of client facing work. I will always write a draft. I'll always research, write a draft myself, and then sometimes it's not quite right. And I'll stick it into ChatGPT, for example, and say, give it some prompts like how I kind of want it to sound and things like that. And it will spit out another version. And then it's just kind of almost like cherry picking. Okay, I like that. I'll put that in there and adding things in. But in terms of like, let's say just copying and pasting a brief into ChatGPT and saying, right, let's go. You do the research, you do that. I just wouldn't trust it. I couldn't trust it to then give it to a client and then them to ask me questions and I wouldn't know the answers because I've not done the research. I've not understood it. And that's a really key point when we create, like, especially education films and working with the Science Museum. We're kind of always thinking of the end user. I don't want someone that's standing in the Science Museum. It'd never get that far. But standing in the Science Museum going, oh, this is vague. I don't really understand it. The Science Museum have got so many checks, they'd never let it happen. But we've got to think, if those checks weren't in place, do we want that kind of to be there? And I like this job because I get to understand and learn new things. Every time we get a new briefing, I've got to learn how neodymium magnets work or how solar panels operate and things like that. And I've got to understand that. And if I can't understand it or Mike can't understand it, then our jobs are not complete. We need to understand it to be able to explain it in its simplest form. And I think it's key. And using ChatGPT, yes, it'd be quicker, I think, for just to get a script. But yeah, the headache that would come after it with the questions from clients, and yeah, it'd be a nightmare.
I think it's also doing yourself a disservice because you could do it better yourself, even if it takes longer. Specifically, what AI is not very good at yet is identifying interesting rabbit holes that you can go down. I know with some of the scripts that I write, a lot of the times, yes, it's about one thing, but to explain the one thing well, because, I have the luxury of 20 minutes to explain something. It's not like a 2-minute explainer. It's kind of a mini documentary. So the audience wants those rabbit holes. And if I tell ChatGPT, oh, I don't know, tell me everything you know about the North Star, like make an outline about the North Star and then like, let's go with it. It's going to give me very generic stuff. And actually, if I start reading, I'll find out that, oh, actually, it's useful for this reason and it's weird for this reason. And I go into stellar models and I go into like all kinds of weird adjacent rabbit holes that AI wouldn't have picked out for me. So not only are you learning about this specific star, you're also learning about a little bit about, it's like a tasting menu, about 5 other things. And what makes a really good story is when you're able to weave those 5 things together and be like, this is how they're all connected. And that's why this specific finding is actually mind-blowing when on the surface it maybe doesn't look like it. That's the payoff. And AI can't do that yet, in my opinion.
Yeah, unless we prompted it really well. I think you're saying like those rabbit holes is not about, you might write another page about this extra bit of information, but it might be just one fact that you stick in the script. I think that is the good thing. And yeah, I'm not going to get onto like, I run like a geography platform, so it's not quite science, but yeah, I'm really passionate about it. I know I read a lot externally about that kind of topic. So when I'm writing a script, like ChatGPT doesn't know what I know, so I'm writing it and I'm thinking, oh yeah, but that would be nice to go in there, and it can't do that because it's not got that kind of frame of reference, has it? So yes, it's good to a point, but it's just using it in the right way at this point. It will get better, but yeah.
You mentioned the Science Museum, and that's amazing because I wanted to talk about 2 specific examples of work that you've done with your studio. And one of them is the Science Museum project that you've done. I know that you made a series of explainer videos for the engineering gallery. Is that right?
Yeah.
And what's really cool about it is I think, I was taking a look on your website at them, and I think everyone that's listening has interacted with a video like this in a museum at some point. But I don't think very many people stop and think about how they're made or who makes them, or even realize that there's like an external team of people that are involved in this kind of work. So I would love to understand, like step by step, what goes into hearing about something like this, getting the bid, doing the work, what kind of checks do they have? Just walk me through the whole process.
Yeah. Okay. So this was a tender we won. So it's a public tender, so a public opportunity to pitch for this work at the Science Museum, put out 2022, let's say. That's what I want to say. I think it was around then. And it was for a series of 6 films as part to go in the new Engineers Gallery that would highlight the winners of the Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering. And that's an award given out every year. So there'd already been 6 or 5 winners, and there was the 6th was that year, the year the gallery opened. So yeah, they basically put out a call. They want to make these 6 films. Can you pitch an idea, who your team was, your experience to that point, which probably wasn't our strongest at that point. With that in science, we'd done bits and pieces, but and then like a treatment. So how you saw the films coming about, like how you'd actually explain them, how you deliver them, etc. And then that lovely cost that they want to see as well. So we pitched an idea, and the concept that you can kind of see on our website, how it would look. We kind of wanted something that was kind of, we really kind of put our minds in like how would the audience feel when they're standing in a museum and it's noisy. Maybe they're standing with 3 or 4 other people. They're looking at an object, and this film's going to then explain that object or that process. The screen's not that big either. It's probably the size of like less than a computer screen, really. So you're kind of thinking, okay, we probably don't want a voiceover because no one's going to hear that in the gallery. So everything has got to be kind of text on screen to explain this really complicated thing, like GPS, LEDs, digital image sensors, and neodymium magnets. So all these kind of things. So you've got to explain this now with text on screen, and you've got to show something visually, and people have got to get it quite quickly because you've only got, a certain amount of time. And we kind of pitched it. We wanted a 60-second rundown of these inventions to keep people interested, make it dynamic. And we kind of pitched them an idea of like what, how, where, kind of segmented idea. So what it is, really basic definition. What is GPS, how it relates to, probably put it in a bit of context for how you'd use it in your day-to-day life. And then how it works, basically. So, sending signals back and all this kind of technical stuff. And then where you might see it. So GPS in your phone, sat nav, that sort of thing. So we kind of broke it down to those sections and made sure that each film we did was in the same format. So if people are going around the gallery, they understand, what the format they're going to be looking at. And we made sure that there's little titles at the top. So people joining the film, say you're coming in halfway through, could then see what bit they were at. There's a timeline bar at the bottom so they could see how far through the video was. how long they'd probably have to wait to kind of watch it again. So it's all these things we kind of had to think about beyond, someone sitting at home or on their phones watching it on YouTube or whatever. It's a totally different environment. So, we took all that into how we kind of approached the pitch, and wrote like a sample script of like really short, sharp, like snappy sentences that would kind of work well on screen. And basically they bought into it. The bottom line is they bought into it. We had an interview and they really liked it. And I think they said at the time they had 17 pitches and they thought that was a lot of pitches. And we were the last pitch they saw at the end of the day. So it could have gone either way. It could have been like, oh, here comes another one. But they said, they opened the pitch and the way we just presented it really cleanly and defined everything that we wanted to do nicely and clearly, they really liked that. And I think we were on to a winner as they opened the pitch. So that was great.
Mm.
And so we made those 6 films and we've been doing one film every year since. I think the gallery's open for another couple of years. It might be extended, but we'll just make a film as long as the gallery stays open.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think you brought up a very good point that even if you are an animator, to actually work as an animator, you need so many other skills. Like what you just mentioned, like presenting your pitch in a way that is easily understandable, digestible, all the business side of things that you're running, working on marketing yourself, all of that. So, even though officially a title might say animator of some description, if you're working for yourself, there's so many other marbles in that bag.
Definitely.
What was that like for you, kind of growing into all of those different roles and experiences?
If I think about it now, sounds like a nightmare. But no, I think it's just like you just learn as you go. And I think the takeaway from all that kind of thing, the thing I always try and think of is whether it's writing a script, creating a film, producing a pitch deck, running the business, selling the business, is boiling that down into the simplest form you can. Like if it cannot be too complicated, whatever it is, it's got to be really simple for people to understand. The majority of people do not understand what I do. I spoke to a guy the other day and it was just a chat we had after. This random guy after a swim. He was like, oh, so we were just having a chat. He said, oh, what do you do? And I said, I run an animation studio. And it's the same look I get from everyone. It's just completely blank. I think he's in his 60s or whatever. But, he just looked at me blank. He was like, what's that? And I get it all the time. And then I've got to try and explain what I do. I don't have an answer for that. It's complicated. I haven't thought of a simple, boiled down way to explain to someone who doesn't know anything about it. Mm. So it's that's what you've got to really think about. What is the simplest way? And I think that going back to the Science Museum pitch, with that in mind, we really wanted to keep it clean, clear, structured, not go into too much detail. And I think that is probably the one bit of advice that I keep going over in my head, that is like, it's got to be simple. It's got to be simple.
Having a role like that where, you sometimes struggle to describe it to people or people don't get it when you tell them what it is. Has that ever affected your confidence to pursue this? Because it's not a very conventional path. It's not maybe a path that you have a direct person you can look at as an example and say, I want to be them. So if I just do what they did, then I'll have achieved what I wanted. How did that feel to kind of make your own path step by step? And did it ever kind of get you down?
I think finding a niche or something that you want to focus on makes it easier. I think for those initial 6 years, if we break it down like that, where we were doing everything for anybody, it was sort of like you were selling the studio rather than the kind of content you wanted to make. So you were saying, oh, we're an animation studio. And that to a lot of people is difficult to kind of think like, oh, what do they do? Like, can they sell the next Nike trainers, or do they make medical explainers? And I'm, it's difficult for me to sit there and go, oh, we do everything, because that looks like you're just desperate. And you're also thinking, oh, well, that's not what we're about. We're just saying that we can do a lot of things. And trying to explain that on the website or to people is a bit more challenging. And especially when you come up against, say, maybe like for years, clients would say, oh, do you do e-learning courses? And we'd be like, oh, no, we don't do that. But over the last year or so, we've got a team in, and we've got people on board that can do that kind of stuff. So now I've got to kind of resell that kind of idea and say, oh, we now do e-learning courses, but they don't know us for that, and that's a struggle. And it's like, but we can do it. So that kind of gets me down. Like we can do it. Something you've just got to give us the chance to deliver, and it's going to be the same quality as the animation. You just got to kind of understand. They've got to take a risk. But the last 4 years, where we kind of dialed down into education and things, it's an easier sell. We can get a group of work, like the work on our website pretty much now encompasses that idea. So it's easy for us to approach an education kind of based company or a company that want an explainer video and say, this is what we do. But I needed that 6 years to realize that. So you've got to kind of understand where you sit and what you want out of it in terms of, if you want to make money and establish a business, I probably wouldn't niche down straight away without that experience. If you're coming off the back of, if you've got experience, maybe you've had another job or something, you're coming into this new and thinking, I've got a bank of experience. I've worked here for 5 years under this thing. Then yeah, you probably can niche out. But if you're starting from scratch, it's difficult to then go in and say, no, I specialize in this without any kind of backing. That's not to say you can't do it, it's just tougher.
I think there's two things here. One is that it's very counterintuitive, but it is very real. That the more you get selective about what you do and who you do it for, the more business actually comes your way. Yeah. Or maybe not the more business in terms of volume of clients, but more like bang for your buck. You'll get more closed deals per conversation that you're having. Does that make sense? Than someone who's trying to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, like you said, it took you 6 years to learn that. I think that's a very, very common sort of stumbling block or hard lesson to learn for new entrepreneurs or business owners. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is a lot of the struggles that you were talking about, sort of the frustration of once you did establish yourself, you felt like when you wanted to branch out into something else, you felt like, oh, I had made the box around myself already. So now pushing out of it again is difficult and frustrating. It's the exact same struggle that someone who is starting completely new, maybe without even a portfolio, would face, right? Like, I can do it. I have the skills. I did a course or I've been practicing. I just don't have a paying client. Give me the chance. Let me show you.
Yeah. And you're just waiting for that break. Yeah. And I think, and that for me, because we're trying to work with kind of educating businesses and, learning and development, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where the e-learning thing comes from. I do feel like I'm starting a new business. It's very odd. It's like going back in time and starting again, and you've got nothing to back. You can do it and things, and it's a challenge. It's exciting, but at the same time, you can get you down and think, come on, let's just get one thing off the ground. Let's do this.
And I think that's a powerful lesson for people who maybe they finished some kind of science degree and they don't want to be an academic or they don't want to work in a lab, but they don't know what else they can do. And they have a creative streak or interest or hobby. The thing stopping them is like, oh, but I've never done this. It's going to be so hard. I don't have any proof of my experience or anything. But that struggle and that feeling is always going to be there, just in different mutations, so to speak. So I think this is a really great reminder to get rid of that way of thinking, because if you let it happen, that will always stop you.
And I think if you've got a passion behind something, it will happen at some point. If you keep plugging away, it will happen.
Okay, so the second example of your work that I wanted to get to, because this one's juicy, is that you made a bunch of COVID-19 related videos for the NHS, which for all these non-UK listeners, that's the UK's public health service. It's part of the government. So Tinmouse Studios made a bunch of educational explainers answering common questions about the vaccine, about COVID itself. How was that project different from the Science Museum one? Thank you so much for tuning in to the first half of the episode with Tom. Just before we continue, I want to take a quick moment to ask you a favor. If you are enjoying this conversation, there are 3 things that you can do to support this show that are completely free. First of all, leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. It really helps other people find these conversations and this podcast. Second, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the weekly episodes that are dropping. And if you're on YouTube, leave a comment of what you've learned so far. But honestly, the best thing you can do is share this episode with a friend who you think would benefit from it. These stories only really matter if they reach the ears that are meant to hear them. All right, thank you so much. Let's get back to
totally different. It was more public service. It was a very interesting project in terms of the deadline, the amount of content they wanted. We had to translate it into 17 languages, which is mad. But we'd done a lot of work with the NHS previously, so we kind of knew the tone of voice we needed and how it needed to be presented. But this was kind of I think this for us was like, this is something personal to everyone. This isn't like, oh, we're going to explain, like we've done films on bowel cancer or asthma and things like that kind of, they don't affect everyone. So, but this was kind of something that, this is going out and this has affected everyone on a global scale. So you kind of, you already knew the subject matter and, the importance of why it was being created. I don't know how much science there was. I think there was bits and bobs in terms of how technically the vaccination had been created and tested, and the fact that it was safe and the processes it had gone through. So that was quite key. But coupled with that, like, we obviously needed to make the films look kind of inviting, engaging, and make sure that people actually could kind of see themselves and understand why it was important.
I'm very curious about a little bit of a cheeky question.
Yeah.
The vaccine is obviously a very controversial concept.
Yes.
Reserving all judgments and statements about that, but it is a controversial thing. It divided a lot of people and societies and families. Did you feel any of that when you were working on this? Did you get any kind of glimpse into backlash that could happen, or was the NHS kind of like very strict about ways that you can and can't word things to avoid any kind of controversy? I'm curious about any red tape that you came up against.
Yeah, I mean, red tape. I don't think it was any red tape. Like, for me, I was the vaccination. So for me, I could see the benefit in these videos. That was my personal opinion. I felt like, yes, this kind of story needed to be told. I wonder whether it would have been interesting if I was, say, anti the vaccine, whether I would have taken the job on. That's quite an interesting topic that we obviously never know the answer to. But yeah, I think the thing they were really encouraging was that people would identify with someone and not using like one or two characters to kind of go through the whole journey for each of them. It was all about kind of cutting in between different shots and scenes and making sure there were different people having the vaccine, asking the questions, being part of that community. I think that was a really key point to the whole thing. And then I think there was that underlying kind of science bit as well, which we were trying to communicate through kind of iconography and graphics and things that maybe we took the characters away from, so we could actually separate the film into those two areas. But yeah, no, I don't think there was much red tape.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, I think it was just, but they were produced quite quickly, and they didn't care. But it was kind of like, we need these films to go out. The scripts were all double checked. I think the scripting part was the bit that took the longest. I think once that was done, we'd kind of created a visual style for it that they were kind of happy with. I think it was just kind of go.
Nice. How do you or your clients measure the success of your videos? What would make them go, yeah, we're really happy with that? Is it for something like this, which ended up on YouTube? Is it related to the number of views that it gets? Is it just like a intuitive feeling of like, yep, they look good and they hit the brief, so we're happy? Is it connected to revenue?
Not for the NHS.
Not for the NHS, obviously, but
well, I say a lot of stuff we do for science things that is not revenue based. So, if you think about the Science Museum, or we've done work for the Imperial College, and it's not revenue based. So they're not looking for that. They're looking for a response, basically. Those COVID films did really well on YouTube. Like, the numbers were up, but if you think, oh, it's got like tens of thousands of views. But if you look at it across the board of the UK, you think, yeah, okay, tens of thousands of views over like how many millions of people there are in this country. It's not a lot. I think we don't usually get feedback from the NHS. Now, that might be us not asking for it or them not providing it, but I kind of always think that's a good thing. They're not coming back and saying, oh, we need to change this, we need to change that.
Yeah, no news is good news.
No news is good news, yeah. But I think I was kind of concerned throughout that process, if I'm being brutally honest, the fact that there weren't as many checks done on the illustrative elements that we produce, like in terms of, there wasn't like high science in that. So it wasn't like we were dialing down to things that needed to be really specific. Yeah. But the characters and how we portrayed people, we obviously sat there and really tried to like make sure we got these demographics right. But the checks weren't there. And I kind of thought, is the backlash going to come from that? Like, you don't depict this person like this, or there's not, I don't see myself in that. And I wondered whether there'd be backlash in that sense, especially when you went onto social media. But there didn't appear to be, which was, I think there was more questions and statements about people arguing the fact that the vaccine was not a good idea, rather than, picking apart kind of how we'd created the films. So I took that as a bit of a win, because I mean, it's always going to be that is always going to be controversial, yes or no, the vaccine. So that was always going to happen.
And have you ever had a video that is kind of the opposite, where, maybe it is very technical and very like science heavy or medical heavy? And, how do you approach that as someone who didn't study that? How do you know when you've done enough research and you feel like you're at the point where you understand something enough to be confident to go and make a video about this weird magnet or some very specific genetic therapy?
I think the simple answer is I don't. I never feel comfortable. When we work with the Science Museum, or we work with a big marketing agency that are medical based, so they market medical products, and those tend to be very, very detailed in terms of the subject matter and how we create things on screen. And that, for me, it's above me. I'm not writing the scripts for those medical films. That's not what I do. I'll do the Science Museum, manageable. But when you get into like really high-end medical stuff, that's what I'm saying. There's specific writers that they hire, that the agency hire, and they're hiring, voiceover artists that do that specifically. So it is just a visual thing at that point. And it's just meetings, basically. It's us drawing something based on the imagery they give us, and then them coming back and saying, okay, yeah, that's fine, but the way it moves isn't. Like the stuff we did for Imperial College, for example, was a lot to do with atom structure. If you watch the film, you'd be like, oh, there's not a lot of, how can they kind of get that wrong? Because it was kind of like very stylized, but it was just the gaps between the atoms and making sure the structure looked right. And it's just those little things that, at the end of the day, we're science communicators in a sense, but we've not got that background. So those little things you miss. And I think it is just like calls and trying to understand and being open to that, and not sitting there going, well, I think it looks good, so yeah, screw you. It's kind of, no, you've got to sit there and understand that this has got to be really, really on point. And Mike is the perfect person for this. He's these devils in the detail, man. He will sit there and like probably do too much research. He'll go into the details and he'll find something, and I'll be like, oh, it's taking forever. But then when he shows it to the client, they're like, this is great. And I'm like, yeah, he is doing it right. I've got the patience to a point, but he's got the patience of a saint. He'll keep dialing down until it's specifically correct. And clients love it because they sit there and go, this is exactly what we want, and they can really see it. Like that magnet film, he went into the detail and produced something that was near enough spot on that just needed tweaks. So it's just working with the right people to understand that, and knowing that the detail's got to be right. I think that's the important bit. It's understanding that what you're creating is not just a creative film that's meant to look nice. It's also got to deliver the facts, and in the right way. It's got to deliver information that people can take away and understand and repeat back to someone else. And they're not going to turn around and go, well, that's wrong. It needs to be right, yeah.
Where does the creativity start and stop? And what I mean by that is, if I imagine like a little bacterium animation, and it's kind of moving along and it's doing its bacteria thing, and it has all its little organelles and all that kind of thing. Like, people can imagine that in their head. They've seen it a million times. There's only so many ways you can depict something like that. Or a magnetic field. Like, there's one way to draw a magnetic field. It just is what it is, So where does the creative element come in? You as the creative, like where do you get to play with things if you already are bound by these rigid, immovable things, like the distance between atoms, or the size of something compared to something else, or the movement the little cell makes?
That is a good question. I think it depends on the client. Like when you say about like bacteria and things, we've created bacteria that looks very bacteria-like, as you'd imagine, or we've created bacteria that's got a face on it and it's got a bit of personality. It depends on what the client wants, and but that's the good bit. That's why that's our job, is to take that essentially dry PDF and then write a script, create something that can actually almost be shown to anyone over the age of, like, let's say, I like to say about 7 or 8. Kids about 7 or 8, they can start understanding concepts, and if you can kind of explain it to some level at that age, then you're doing a good job, I think. So it's trying to think about those audiences and create something, as you're saying, like a bacteria looks like a bacteria, but it does. But there's different ways you can interpret that. Like you could paint it, couldn't you? You could create it in like stop frame motion. You create it in 3D. So there's always those mediums, and then you can change the color, and you can do this and this and this. So there's lots of different ways you can interpret it. But I just think, going back to that earlier point of like, you just got to always keep in mind that it's got to be accurate. It's got to be. And some films, be doing medical stuff. Yeah, I mean, they're not the most enjoyable films you work on from a creative angle because they've got to be really, really specific. But we'll always try and push it. I think our thing is when we get a new briefing, we'll come up with some style frames or something and we'll push it there. We'll say, this is what we want to do. Can we do this? How far can we get to this? And then they just tell us the parameters. They either say, yeah, or they say you need to dial it back by like 20%. It needs to be more accurate and not have a face, so it's based on the client really at the end of the day. But then when you work with like a company like TED Ed, they kind of let you free and let you do whatever you want to do. So their kind of ethos is we want the subject matter to be user friendly, that people need to understand it and engage with it, and it needs to be kind of open and accessible to everyone rather than being like super accurate. That's what the voiceover does. So the voiceover is the accurate bit. You can kind of be fast and free with the illustration style. So it really does depend on the client. Yeah.
I think it would be helpful if you could give like a overview of your process. How does that look from initial meeting that they're interested to you pitching something to storyboarding? Like walk me through the categories of how that works real quick.
Yeah, so from the moment we kind of win a job, we'll have that kind of kick-off meeting with the client and understand what the information they have, how they want to tell that story to a degree, where it's going to go. I think that's a really important bit. Like, is it going to be in a museum? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be on social media, website? It's loaded. And then we kind of analyze that like, okay, so now you've got to be a viewer in that zone where you're watching it. How are we going to deliver that? And then from there, we usually go off and kind of do some more research. And I try and get a script to them as soon as we can. I think that's really important, even if it takes us a day, even if it's something that we're kind of like 80% happy with. If we can just send it to them. And whether that's involving someone else to come on board as a script writer or whether we do it in-house and trying to deliver that script with at least one image of how we think the film's going to look. The earlier we can get that to them, it gives them a quick idea of like what we think. And then we can kind of gauge from them, okay, is this the right tact? And we've got time then to actually go through different versions and things. I think spending too long on something, say, let's take a week over a couple of days, we could spend a week and get really, really invested in an idea. And then it just go to nothing because they go, oh, that's not the direction we wanted to go in. And then you've wasted a week, really. So getting that quick idea, especially if you haven't pitched anything and they just come to you fresh, getting that idea across to them straight away to have an idea of what they want. Because often the client isn't a creative or maybe they've never done an animation before. They've never done anything like this. So you've kind of really got to drag it out of their heads. They've got an idea in this, but they don't know how to explain it or they don't know until they see it. Yeah, we've really got to try and push that in front of them and get them to understand what they do and they don't like.
Do you present them just with one option or do you present 2 or 3 different creative directions and ask them which one of these do you like the best?
I used to produce, like 3 things, but it's a nightmare because then you do a 4th, then you do a 5th. There's no real right or wrong. I still know studios that do that. For us, especially that first version, we just give them a version. This is what we want to do because maybe we give them a version of that and we give them some examples of other films. Sometimes we give them examples of films, third-party films or our films and get them to kind of choose the style or things they like before we create anything. But we do genuinely. They probably don't like it, but just like one thing. Because at the end of the day, we are the creatives. This is the direction we feel it should go in.
Yeah.
And then we'll work on that. I don't want to have to produce 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 styles. Because once you give them 3, they think, oh, we can have another 3. No, you can't. You need to choose one out of those 3. So it's so much more difficult coming up with 3 good ideas. You're still going to have one you really like. So we might as well just present that one. So
you have the kickoff meeting, you present them as fast as possible with the direction that you want to take it in script-wise and visual-wise, and they say, yeah, we're happy with that. What happens next?
So that never happens, but yeah. I wish it happened like that. But yeah, so the scripting is usually the bit that we just go through iterations. So we write a script. What we do is like we get a bullet point list from them of the content, any research they've got. We'll then write the simplest script we can, the most boiled down script that's definitely too vague for them. We send that back to them and we tell them to stick the information back in. We want them to then stick that jargon or that specific bit back into the script. Because if we presented them with a really long script with all that stuff in it, they'd add more to it, and then the film's way over length. So we like to strip it back and then have them add bits in as we go forward, and then hopefully you're left with a film that is actually on budget instead of going over. So that's a really important thing. And kind of, we're doing style stills at the same time, trying to get that right. We'll probably create 3 by the end of that process. And then we go into storyboard. So once the script's locked down, we then storyboard everything. Storyboard is just pictures of how the film will look basically against the script. And again, that goes through iterations and tweaks and things. And that's usually where the client, like, when they see the visuals, they then tweak the script again. They say, oh yeah, okay, that's the visuals doing that. So we don't need to add that in the script, or that needs a bit more explanation. And that's kind of our pre-production phase. That's where we want to get it right. That's the cheaper bit to make amends than it is to do the next process is animation. And that's a bit more time consuming for us to then amend big chunks of script or big chunks of visuals, because we've got to basically go back to the start and do it all again. So that's the kind of the interesting bit. That's the bit for the client to get it right. And that's the kind of where they really formulate an idea of, this is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to be shown on screen. Is the audience going to understand this? And they're the kind of questions that they're asking themselves all the time. And we're trying to obviously ask that internally. That kind of period takes about 4 weeks, about a month from the start, from let's say a 2 or 3 minute film. And then we go into animation. So once they've signed everything off, we start animating. It could be 2 or 3 weeks. Then we deliver a first draft. They review it, make sure everything's moving correctly. But in terms of style-wise, it should be fine. But technically, sometimes that comes back, like you're not moving that thing right, or that the cells wouldn't move that quickly, or whatever it is. And then we do a second draft, and then by third draft, it's pretty much done. When we send the second draft, we send through the voiceover with that as well. Any sound effects, music we put on. It should take about 6 or 7 weeks to create a film if everything runs smoothly. But it's one of those things where the Science Museum give you, for example, longer deadlines, and you take that. You say, okay, if it's going to take 9-10 weeks, great. The more time we can have, the better, really, as long as it doesn't go on forever. You can create a better job the longer you have. So
I am curious about something you said earlier, where you think about making content for people who are sort of from the ages of 7, 8 and up. Anyone sort of in that bracket should understand it. And I want to talk about your geography project and webs that is designed for kids who are between 7 and 11 years old. Mm-hmm. It has an awesome name, Archie and Bean's World Adventures.
Yeah, nice plug. Thank you.
And it has so much going on. It has a YouTube channel, a podcast, a website with interactive activities. It's brilliant. Like, it reminds me of when I was a kid, I had this massive book. It was like a coffee table book, I guess, but it was like an atlas of the world. And it was just kind of like satellite photos of every continent, and then like the driest place in the world and the wettest place in the world and the hottest and the highest and the lowest valley and just all the extremes of the world. And then I don't know if there was another one with animals too, or maybe it was part of the same book. I don't know. But like which animals you can find on which continent and all this kind of cool stuff. I was obsessed with that book, like obsessed. And I feel like this is like the 21st century version of that in some degree. So I was super stoked to find it. What inspired you to do it? Where did that come from?
That is my passion. Outside of animation is travel. It's learning about the world. I've got too many books. I've had to build an office in the garden so I can have a world map on the wall because my wife won't let me have one in the house. So these things, it's where my passion lies. So it was just created out of the love of that. And I've got 2 kids. They're 6 and 4. I kind of created this the year before she was born, like the first one. So I kind of always felt like, I want to put my passion into education. That's what we do as a business. It kind of just grew really organically. Like, it was just kind of like an outpouring of, okay, I can just put all this stuff in my head onto paper and kind of just talk about what I love. It's become now Archie and Bean's World Adventures, and it's on YouTube and things. And it's just become bigger than probably I imagined in terms of the actual platform. It doesn't really make me any money. I do it for the fun. Mm-hmm. But it's great. Yeah, it's just a really nice thing to do. And you feel like again, it's all research and things. It's me. I'm not a geographer. So it's kind of, there's no real underlying kind of education background from it. But I feel like it's doing a good thing in a good space.
Why do you care so much about education? That's like the through line here and all the things you're doing so far that we've talked about. And why is it so important to you?
I just feel like I don't know. I like doing it because I like learning. Didn't like learning at school, but you come out of it and you start learning about topics and things that you're interested in. I feel like it's a good thing to give back, and I just feel like it's benefiting society. I feel like, yeah, I'm actually doing something worthwhile. And I think Mike does as well. We stopped working for oil and gas companies like 5 or 6 years ago because some of the films we were putting out just didn't align with what we or who we were as people. And I think that kind of shift has made us do things in a different way, and just doing films that make a difference that can actually, I just like to think that when we make a film like that there's a kid there or an adult, whoever it is, watching it and getting something back from it, not just going, oh, I need to go and buy a donut or I need to go and buy a new pair of shoes. It's like, no, they're taking something with them and it's going to help them grow. They're going to put that back into their everyday lives. They're going to teach someone else that information. It's going to be passed down. It's a lot more than just a film. And yeah, I think that's definitely through the work we do at Tinmouse and through Archie and Beans. It's the same thing. It's the, if I don't get loads of views on a YouTube video that we put out on Archie, I'm not sitting there crying about it. I'm like, yeah, but 80 people watched it and they love it. But then some videos have got like 1,000 viewers, and you think, oh, there's 22,000 people loving this, and they're all getting that same information. So that's just very rewarding, put it that way.
That's awesome, dude. I love it. And you light up when you talk about this too, which is so
I do,
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. We need more people like that in the world. So as we come to the end of the episode, we've talked about a million different things. But looking to the future, coming back to the beginning of our chat about AI and how that's changing everything, where do you see Tinmouse going? Where do you think you'll be in 10 years from now?
I have no idea.
That's the only right answer.
I've always said, in terms of AI, from a technical perspective, people obviously raise their concerns about it and things like that. So I was going to take my job and all this kind of stuff. And I don't think that's quite correct. I think if you look at how animation was even 30 years ago, people, drawing on pen to paper and things like that and scanning stuff in and doing that kind of stuff. And then obviously computers came on, software could do that a lot quicker. The industry still exists. It's not going to take your job. I just think this goes across the board. If you don't adapt to it, it will take your job. And I think that is a failing on my part. If the business crumbles in the next 10 years because of AI, it's because I didn't keep up and I stayed in the same world that I knew. So I think it's on me. That's how I feel anyway. Mm-hmm. I don't really feel like it's going to take my job. I've just got to adapt how I do it and use the technology. In terms of where we're going, I think just going into more education, being more focused in that and hoping that people recognize us for that. That would be really nice. I think for me, it's like just taking Archie and Beans as that kind of platform to grow that and to push that into something that, could essentially make money, be a bit more of a business and reach more people. And doing that again, maybe doing that within science or doing that within history or, creating another platform that went well and doing things like that. That actually kind of gave back to kids and did things in a fun way and be able to educate people in a more engaging way than I kind of got taught at school. Obviously, we didn't have YouTube and stuff, but it was just textbooks. I just remember how dry it was, and like history and science. Science was a bit different because you could do experiments sometimes, but there were points where it was quite,
abstract
writing. Yeah, and it just didn't make sense to me. But it's not until you have the chance in this kind of line of work to then go, right, now I'm going to explain this in the way that I should have been explained when I was a kid. So that's probably another reason I like the education. How would I want to learn this information? How would I do it? So yeah, we want to scope out and be more education focused and be able to one day kind of brand Tinmouse as an education animation studio or whatever. Because at the moment we don't do that. We tell people that, but it's not, branded because we don't think we're quite far enough in. But I think to be able to do that would be incredible. Yeah.
And what's like a dream project that you would want to do?
So I have a dream. I do have a dream. So Exhibition Road in London houses the Science Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the Natural History Museum. It also houses Imperial College and the Royal Geographical Society. So that's 5 institutions in education. And I want a film. I want to make a film for each of those 5. I'm 2 down. I'm in discussion with 1. I can't tell you who that is. And then we've got 2 more to do. So that would be within 10 years. If I can do that, if I can get a film for each of those institutions and walk down Exhibition Road and say, yeah, done. That would be amazing for me.
It's like playing Monopoly. It's like playing Monopoly and you get every single one of those. Because I know the road you're talking about, and they really are. It's like one long street, and all 5 of these are next to each other, literally.
Yeah. Take my kids there and basically walk into each museum and say, yeah, that's my film, that's a film, that's a film. I took my eldest to the Science Museum to watch the films we'd done at the Engineers Gallery, and bless her, she was only about 4 or 5, didn't have a clue. She was like not interested. Like, what's this over here? I'm like, yeah, okay. She's not old enough, but that's fine. Yeah, basically, yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. And if you have one message that you'd want a listener to take away from this conversation, what would that be?
I think keep doing what you're passionate about. I think that's it. If you're starting a business, you need to make money. Everyone needs to make money, sadly. And we need a roof over our heads. We need to eat, all these normal things that we need to do. You've got to make money. So yeah, okay, you can set up a business like we did and you can go after all the clients just to kind of get your business going and things like that. But don't lose what you want to do if there's something you want to do. Like for me, okay, it's not science communication, so I'm not podcast friendly at this point, but Archie and Beans, geography, that for me was like the external passion. I never left that. I never stopped doing it. And I think having that in the background as the business has developed, like Tinmouse has developed, has allowed me at the points in time where I think, is Tinmouse doing the right thing? Like the oil and gas, it gives you that outlet and you're still doing what you're passionate about. And those things will align. And I think they are aligning now. There were the last 3 or 4 years, things have started aligning. And now that we've done all this great stuff within like science communication and environmental and medical and things, education, I can now bring in Archie and Beans to that and say, look, this is now part of Tinmouse and it kind of all makes sense. So don't lose what you're passionate about, but you've still got to make money at the end of the day. So yeah, you got to balance it off, but yeah, just don't stop.
It's okay to not be 100% on the thing that you want to be doing 100% of the time, especially at the beginning.
Yes. Lacey, that's simple.
Tom, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to chat.
Thanks very much.
And that is a wrap on my conversation with Tom Sanders, founder of Tinmouse Animation Studios. If you want to check out some of their work, I have put a link in the show notes. As always, please leave a 5-star review. Make sure you are subscribed. And thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time.